I was the woman they whispered about behind velvet curtains, the worthless daughter-in-law who didn't belong in a mansion lined with marble floors. My mother-in-law smiled at guests, but the moment the doors closed, her voice cut sharper than glass. "You're nothing without my son." I kept quiet, folding napkins, serving champagne, pretending I didn't notice the cameras she hid to humiliate me online. But what she never saw were the late nights I spent building an empire from my laptop. The day she needed a loan to save her empire, the worthless woman signed the check. The first time I walked through the grand arched doors of the Whitmore estate, I thought I had stepped into a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting light across polished marble floors. Every wall glowed with portraits of ancestors dressed in velvet, their eyes following me as if to ask what a woman like me was doing here. Guests in glittering gowns offered shallow congratulations, their compliments sticking to me like perfume that didn't belong. I smiled politely, hands folded in front of me, my heart pounding with a secret hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be home. Margaret, my mother-in-law, descended the staircase with the grace of a queen. She embraced me lightly, lips brushing my cheek, but her eyes held a chill that made the room feel colder than the marble beneath my heels. "Emily," she said sweetly, "you look simple, refreshing." The guests laughed, a sound that prickled my skin. I pretended not to notice, nodding as if I had been complimented. In that moment, I understood the rules of this place. Every word had two meanings, and every smile carried a blade. Days turned into weeks, and the glitter of the mansion lost its charm. Behind closed doors, Margaret's sweetness evaporated. She gave me endless tasks, disguised as favors. "Would you mind preparing the hors d'oeuvres? The staff shouldn't waste time on trivial things. Or perhaps you could polish the silver. It will keep you busy." I obeyed because I had no power to refuse. Each chore chipped away at the illusion I had clung to during those first moments in the house. One afternoon, while arranging flowers in the drawing room, I noticed a faint glimmer behind a gilded frame. Curiosity tugged at me, and I reached behind it. My fingertips brushed against cold metal. A camera lens stared back. My stomach dropped. I pulled away instantly, pretending I hadn't seen it, though my heart thundered in my chest. Why would there be a hidden camera in the drawing room? The answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, a group of women at a luncheon giggled as they glanced at me. One of them, a neighbor with too much champagne in her glass, leaned closer. "I loved the little video of you scrubbing the kitchen floor," she whispered, eyes gleaming with mockery. "So authentic, so humble." My breath caught. I hadn't scrubbed the floor for anyone but Margaret. That night, I found the proof. My phone buzzed with a notification. Gossip Rich Wives, a private group full of local socialites. Against my better judgment, I clicked. And there it was, a grainy clip of me, hair tied back, wiping sweat from my brow as I knelt on the tiled kitchen floor. The caption read, "When the maid marries up." Laughter exploded in the comments. My cheeks burned as if each one were a slap. I wanted to scream, to confront Margaret, but I knew better. She thrived on spectacle, on watching me lose control. Instead, I locked myself in the bathroom, staring at the woman in the mirror. My eyes brimmed with tears, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. The mansion echoed with distant laughter, reminding me of my place. That night, for the first time since entering this house, I cried quietly into a towel to muffle the sound, but beneath the tears, something stirred. A spark, faint but alive. I began to see the pattern. The cameras weren't for safety. They were weapons. Margaret didn't want a daughter-in-law. She wanted a pawn. Every video, every photo was ammunition to remind me I didn't belong. She thought she was teaching me humility. What she didn't know was that she was teaching me how to play her game. The following morning, I walked into the breakfast room. Margaret sat at the head of the table, sipping her coffee like a monarch. My husband scrolled through his phone, indifferent. I placed a tray of fruit in front of them, my hands steady though my heart raged. Margaret smirked. "See, Emily, you are useful after all." I smiled back, not because I believed her, but because I finally understood. Every cruel word, every hidden camera, every humiliation was building something inside me. Not weakness, not despair, but fire. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I returned to the mirror. The same face stared back, but it no longer looked defeated. My eyes no longer belonged to the woman who had arrived here wide-eyed and hopeful. They burned now, sharpened by betrayal, ignited by the taste of injustice. I whispered to my reflection, my voice steady, my vow unshakable. "You will not break me. You will not own me. One day, you will regret every word." For the first time, I didn't see a victim staring back. I saw a woman reborn in silence, waiting for the right moment to strike. The humiliation from those leaked videos clung to me like a second skin, but I learned to wear it as if it didn't hurt. Around the mansion, I moved quietly, compliant as though I had accepted my place. Margaret would hand me trivial tasks, polishing silverware, refolding linens already pressed, and I obeyed with a smile. To her, I was harmless, a dull ornament attached to her son. That illusion gave me freedom. Because when the house went silent and the lights dimmed, my second life began. I would slip into the study, laptop balanced on my knees, and the glow of the screen became my only ally. My fingers danced across spreadsheets, investment portfolios, and encrypted chats with clients who never cared that I lived under the thumb of a mother-in-law. To them, I was Emily Whitmore, financial strategist, not the woman mocked online. Each night, I built a network stronger than any social circle Margaret could buy. My clients were scattered across time zones, traders in London, investors in Singapore, entrepreneurs in New York. They sought my advice, paid handsomely for it, and never once asked about the marble mansion I pretended to rule. In those hours, I remembered who I had been before the wedding, not worthless, but powerful. One evening, as I wrapped up a call with a London hedge fund, a new notification appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "We've met before." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Emily, if you want revenge, I have the data." An old friend of Margaret's empire. My pulse quickened. Attached to the email was a document full of names, dates, and account numbers. My training in finance made it clear. These weren't random numbers. They were records of shell companies, offshore accounts, and transactions that could only belong to someone running from the law. Margaret. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Whoever sent this knew Margaret's darkest secrets, and they had chosen me as their messenger. The next morning, I moved through the house as if nothing had changed. I served breakfast, answered Margaret's questions with polite obedience, and laughed when she mocked my little computer hobby. All the while, my mind raced with the data I had read until dawn. That night, I responded to the email with a single line: "What do you want from me?" The reply came within minutes. "Not from you, with you." The sender revealed himself in fragments. A businessman once ruined by Margaret's ruthless dealings, now rising again with resources and information she had never expected him to keep. He wanted an ally on the inside, and I wanted a weapon. So I listened. He guided me through the labyrinth of Margaret's finances, showing me where she buried her wealth, how she funneled money through charities that never existed, how she disguised debts as investments. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Margaret's empire was fragile, built on deception. Weeks passed, and my quiet rebellion grew roots. With the money I earned from clients and the guidance of my new ally, I began acquiring small shares of the Whitmore Corporation through proxies, slipping unnoticed into the very veins of their business. Each purchase was deliberate, invisible to Margaret's watchful eye. She saw me as a distraction, too busy folding linens to notice the empire she thought unshakable. But I noticed everything. One evening, I printed a single contract. the document proving my growing stake in Whitmore Enterprises. The sound of the printer whirring in the silence of the study felt louder than thunder. My hands trembled as I pulled the pages free, the ink still warm. I slid the contract into a folder and locked it in the small safe I kept hidden in the back of my wardrobe. For the first time, I allowed myself a smile. It wasn't the smile of the obedient daughter-in-law Margaret believed she commanded. It was the smile of a strategist, a woman no longer cornered but climbing from the shadows. Every humiliation had built toward this moment. Every whispered insult had sharpened me into a blade. One day soon, Margaret would open her eyes and realize that the pawn she mocked had become the queen. And when that day came, I would not hesitate. The fall of the Whitmore family empire began with a single, bad investment. Margaret had poured millions into a luxury development overseas, convinced it would crown her reputation as a visionary. Instead, the project collapsed under lawsuits and debt, leaving her scrambling to keep the illusion of wealth intact. Whispers spread through the city. The Whitmores weren't untouchable anymore. For the first time since I entered their home, I saw fear in Margaret's eyes. She called me into the drawing room one evening, her voice lacking its usual venom. "Emily," she said carefully, "you have, some experience with finance, don't you?" I wanted to laugh. Some experience. The irony nearly choked me, but I forced my expression into a mask of modest surprise. "A little," I said softly, folding my hands in my lap. Margaret leaned forward, desperation slipping through her polished exterior. "We could use your help. The company, our family, is in trouble. You'll do this for us, won't you?" I let silence stretch between us, savoring the weight of it. Here was the woman who had called me worthless, who had turned my life into a public joke. Now she sat across from me, begging. "I don't know," I murmured finally. "It seems risky, and I wouldn't want to make things worse." Her eyes sharpened, panic flickering beneath the surface. "Emily, this isn't a request, it's family duty." I tilted my head, feigning uncertainty. In truth, I already held the keys to her kingdom: data, contracts, quiet alliances. She thought she was inviting me into the game. She didn't know I had been playing it all along. Over the next days, she pressed harder. My husband, once indifferent, began to hover, reminding me that I was part of this family and needed to step up. The irony burned, but I kept my composure, smiling faintly as if uncertain of my abilities. Finally, I placed a document on the table in front of Margaret. "I'll help," I said gently, "but you'll need to sign this first." She skimmed it quickly, her lips pursed. The legal jargon meant little to her, but desperation made her reckless. She signed without hesitation, sliding the paper back with a sigh of relief. I thanked her sweetly, hiding the truth. She had just granted me authority over a crucial section of the company's assets. She had handed me the blade, and she didn't even know it. For a moment, I let myself savor the power shift. Hope sparked within me, a vision of victory, of reclaiming everything I had been denied. But hope, I would soon learn, was dangerous, because Margaret was not my only opponent. It began with small signs. My husband spending longer hours at the office, phone calls taken in hushed tones, a cologne I didn't recognize lingering on his suit. At first, I dismissed it, too focused on dismantling Margaret's empire to notice the cracks forming in my marriage. Then one night, unable to sleep, I wandered down the hall and paused outside his study. The door was ajar. Inside, I saw him leaning too close to a young woman, Margaret's personal assistant. Her laugh was low, intimate, the kind reserved for lovers. My stomach turned cold. I backed away before they could see me, my hands trembling. Betrayal burned through me, sharper than anything Margaret had ever inflicted. Still, I told myself it might be nothing. I wanted to believe it was nothing. But the truth revealed itself soon enough. Scrolling through my phone late one night, I found an email thread between my husband and Margaret. My name littered the conversation, always accompanied by ridicule. And then, There it was, the confirmation. "The cameras were your idea," Margaret wrote. "Genius. She never suspected you helped me set them up." "She's too naive to notice," my husband had replied. "Keep humiliating her. The more she breaks, the easier it will be to control her inheritance when the time comes." The room spun. Every clip, every cruel laugh, every whisper behind my back, it hadn't just been Margaret. It had been him, too, my husband, the man who had vowed to protect me, who had promised love in front of an altar, had joined his mother in turning me into a spectacle. I dropped the phone, my chest aching as if the air itself had betrayed me. The walls of the mansion pressed in, suffocating, and for the first time, I saw the truth of my marriage. It had never been real. I was never a partner, never a wife in their eyes. I was a pawn, acquired to be played and discarded. Staring at the contract Margaret had signed, locked safely in my wardrobe, I realized I held the power to destroy them both. But at that moment, the victory felt hollow. The long con I had been building wasn't just against Margaret anymore. It had to be against the man I had once loved. And that, more than anything, shattered me. The night I discovered my husband's betrayal, I felt as though the ground had opened beneath me. My world, already fragile, shattered into something unrecognizable. But grief has a way of turning into clarity, and from that clarity rose a determination sharper than steel. If my marriage had been a lie, then I had nothing left to lose, and a woman with nothing left to lose is a dangerous force. I began quietly, solidifying every thread of power I had been weaving. Proxy shares, hidden contracts, alliances built in the dark, all of them now came together in a single picture. I was no longer a pawn hiding in the shadows. I was ready to step into the light. The board meeting arrived on a gray morning, rain streaking across the glass windows of the corporate tower. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her confidence restored for the occasion, with my husband at her side. Their voices carried the brittle arrogance of people who still believed they held the world in their hands. "Let's begin," Margaret said crisply. "We have difficult matters to discuss, but rest assured, the Whitmore legacy will prevail." I stood at the far end of the room, a folder in my hands. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm, almost serene. When the floor opened for shareholders, I walked forward, heels striking against the marble like the steady beat of a war drum. "I'll take it from here," I said. The room fell into a hush. I laid the documents on the table. Gasps rippled through the air as the numbers became clear. Every signature, every proxy, every silent acquisition was spelled out in black and white. "As of this morning," I announced, "I am the majority shareholder of Whitmore Enterprises." Margaret's smile faltered. My husband leaned forward, his face paling as he scanned the papers. "This is impossible," he stammered. "You don't have that kind of—" "I do," I cut in, "and it's all perfectly legal." The weight of silence settled, heavy and final. Margaret tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. "This is absurd. She's bluffing." "Am I?" I lifted the final page, the one with her own desperate signature, the contract she had signed without reading. "You gave me this power yourself." For the first time, Margaret looked small, trapped, and I had never felt taller. The news spread quickly. By afternoon, social media was ablaze, not with humiliating videos of me, but with headlines announcing the downfall of Margaret Whitmore. Those same clips she had once used to mock me were now evidence of her cruelty, weaponized by journalists who relish the hypocrisy. The narrative flipped overnight. The victimized daughter-in-law had risen, and the so-called matriarch was nothing but a tyrant exposed. At the next shareholders' meeting, I stood at the podium, the microphone cool against my fingers. Faces turned toward me, some skeptical, some curious, all waiting. I took a breath and let the words fall clear and steady. "I'm not your victim," I said, my voice echoing through the room. "I'm your future." The words landed like a thunderclap. The room erupted in whispers, then applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment Margaret's empire slipped from her grasp into mine. But I wasn't finished. In the weeks that followed, I began the systematic dismantling of everything Margaret had built on deceit. With the help of my ally, the businessman she had ruined years before, I released the documents. Offshore accounts, false charities, embezzled funds. The evidence was overwhelming. Newspapers splashed her name across their front pages. Networks ran exposés night after night. Margaret's carefully crafted image unraveled in public view. The same friends who once sipped champagne at her parties now avoided her calls. Business partners canceled deals. Her name, once synonymous with power, became shorthand for disgrace. And as she crumbled, I rose. I met with board members who had once dismissed me. Now they leaned forward, eager for my approval. Investors who had sneered at my presence now courted my opinion. Each meeting, each signature, each nod of acknowledgement was another brick in the foundation of the empire I was building. Not Margaret's empire, but mine. The most surreal moment came at a gala months later. Margaret arrived uninvited, desperate to cling to her fading relevance. The crowd parted, whispers trailing in her wake. When she reached me, her face was lined with something I had never seen before: defeat. For a long moment, we stared at each other. The same woman who had once called me worthless, who had laughed as I scrubbed floors on hidden cameras, now stood before me with downcast eyes. And then, with the weight of the room pressing down on her, Margaret lowered her gaze. She bowed her head. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room witnessed it. The matriarch who once ruled with cruelty now humbled before the daughter-in-law she had scorned. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just revenge. It was revolution. I wasn't playing Margaret's game anymore. I was rewriting it. Power, once intoxicating, soon revealed itself as a lonely throne. The applause, the headlines, the deference in boardrooms, all of it filled the void for a time. But behind the luxury office doors and the chauffeured cars, silence lingered like a shadow. My allies were transactional, my victories measured in contracts and market shares. The warmth of companionship was gone. At night, the mansion felt hollow. I would walk through its echoing halls and remember the girl I had once been, desperate for acceptance, yearning for a family. Now I had everything Margaret had stolen from me: status, authority, respect. But in claiming it, I had driven away what little love remained. One evening, I found my husband waiting in my office. He looked different, disheveled, almost contrite. His eyes darted nervously as he rose to greet me. "Emily," he said, voice low, "I made mistakes. I see that now. But we can fix this. Together." The audacity of his plea nearly stole my breath. This was the man who had humiliated me, who had laughed with his mother as I was torn apart online. And yet here he stood, spinning words of reconciliation, as if love had ever been part of his plan. I folded my arms, watching him squirm under my gaze. "You don't want me," I said coolly. "You want my empire." He shook his head vigorously. "No, it's not like that. I've changed." His words fell flat, a rehearsed performance that only deepened my disgust. Still, doubt crept in. Late at night, I replayed his words. Was I becoming the same cold, calculating figure Margaret had once been? Was I incapable of forgiveness, of softness? The thought gnawed at me. Power had liberated me, but was it twisting me into a reflection of the woman I despised? Then came the contract. A new opportunity slid across my desk by a smooth-talking broker. It promised unprecedented expansion, control over international markets, influence that could eclipse anything Margaret had ever dreamed of. But there were strings attached. The fine print dripped with compromise, with ethical lines blurred into oblivion. Signing it would make me unstoppable. It would also mean selling the last piece of my soul. I stared at the pen in my hand, my heart a battlefield between ambition and conscience. For the first time, I hesitated. And then the real blow landed. News broke one morning with brutal force. My phone buzzed relentlessly, messages flooding in. Headlines screamed across every channel. Emily Whitmore, fraud exposed. The story unfolded like a carefully crafted dagger. Anonymous sources claimed I had embezzled funds, manipulated stock prices, built my empire on lies. Reporters paraded evidence, doctored documents, and fabricated testimonies that painted me as the very villain Margaret had once been. Panic spread through the markets. Shares of Whitmore Enterprises plummeted in hours. Investors pulled out. Board members who had applauded me days before now whispered with suspicion. The empire I had fought to reclaim trembled on the edge of collapse. I dug for the source, desperate for the truth. And then I found it. It wasn't Margaret. It wasn't bitter rivals in the industry. It was him. My husband. He had joined forces with a shadowy network, men who thrived on corporate sabotage, blackmail, and hostile takeovers. Together, they had orchestrated the smear campaign with surgical precision. While I had been guarding against Margaret's fading power, the true enemy had been building his strike in silence. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound Margaret had ever inflicted. He hadn't just abandoned me, he had weaponized my success against me. Every move, every false smile, every plea for reconciliation had been part of a larger plot. As I sat in my office watching the news ticker scroll across the screen, I saw my name dragged through the mud. Fraud, manipulator, worthless. The words echoed, not just from the media, but from the memory of Margaret's voice the day I entered this family. My empire was collapsing. My reputation was shredded. And the world, once so eager to crown me a phoenix, now pointed at me as if I had burned everything myself. I leaned back in my chair, numb, staring at the screen as the ultimate cliffhanger of my life unfolded. Emily Whitmore, the woman who had clawed her way from humiliation to power, was now being branded the one thing she had fought so hard not to be: a fraud. The headlines nearly destroyed me, but despair has a way of sharpening the soul. I refused to be the fraud they painted me to be. I still had weapons Margaret and my husband had underestimated: truth and evidence. And I was prepared to burn the entire board to ashes if it meant freedom. The first move was simple. I released the photos, the messages, the videos. My husband with Margaret's assistant, their affair woven into the very fabric of their plot. The betrayal that had crushed me now became a sword in my hand. Social media, once my cage, became my stage. The world that had mocked me turned its gaze on them. But the affair was only the surface. The deeper cut was financial. From the emails, contracts, and secret ledgers I had collected, I traced every illegal transaction my husband and his new allies had made. Offshore laundering, bribery, fraudulent shell companies. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots. I handed it to the FBI in one tidy file. The investigation moved swiftly. Doors were kicked down. Accounts were frozen. Names that once carried weight in boardrooms now filled indictments in court. My husband, once so smug in his betrayal, stood shackled in front of flashing cameras. Margaret, dragged into the scandal by proximity, withered under the scrutiny she had once thrived on. And me? I walked into the courthouse not as a victim, not as a fraud, but as the woman holding the truth. Inside that same courthouse, I signed the divorce papers. My husband's eyes darted toward me, searching for weakness, for regret. He found none. Margaret sat behind him, her lips thin, her once commanding presence diminished to silence. I didn't spare her a glance as I signed my name with steady hands. The judge stamped the papers. With one sound of the gavel, I was free. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. They shouted questions, hurled accusations, demanded sound bites. I gave them only one thing, a smile. It wasn't the polite forced smile of the woman who had once scrubbed floors in a mansion. It was the smile of liberation, of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged unburned. The major cliffhanger wasn't the downfall of Margaret or my husband. It was the look in my eyes as I stepped into the daylight. The world had no idea what I would do next, and for once I liked it that way. But victory alone wasn't enough. Power without purpose is just another prison. I refused to become Margaret's shadow, so I built something new. From the wealth I had salvaged and rebuilt, I established a foundation dedicated to women like me, those dismissed, underestimated, humiliated, told they were nothing. The fund offered them tools, capital, and training to reclaim their independence. Every contract I signed for them felt like rewriting the pages of my own past. The media, hungry for redemption arcs, devoured the story. From pawn to phoenix, the headlines read, I accepted the praise, but I didn't live for it. My reflection was no longer a stranger. One morning, months after the storm had passed, I stood in front of the mirror again. The woman who stared back was not the tear-streaked, trembling girl who once whispered vows of survival into her reflection. She was steady, independent, fierce. The mirror no longer mocked me, it honored me. And yet, as I touched the glass, I thought of the women who might one day stand where I stood, questioning whether to forgive or to destroy. The world rarely gave us room for both. I couldn't answer for them. I could only build the space where they might choose. I turned away from the mirror, gathering my things for another meeting, another signature, another beginning. My legacy was not in the empire I had inherited, nor in the one I had toppled. It was in the women who would rise after me, carrying pieces of my story in their own. Would I forgive? Perhaps one day. Would I destroy? I already had. The question was no longer mine to answer. It belonged to those who came after, and that was the beauty of it.